This Christian movement believed that the Christian God was evil. I am, of course, speaking about Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism refers to a range of different ideas that emerged around the first few centuries of Christianity. Much of what we knew about Gnosticism was actually lost. Our knowledge of it mostly came from those that criticized it. Well, at least until 1945, as that is when Gnostic texts were discovered in Egypt. Now, the creation story in these texts is what's interesting. Now, I'm basically going to be presenting a very brief summary of a summary by the scholar known as David Brackey. So Gnostics believed that reality was originally just a single supreme God, so complex that our human minds wouldn't be able to comprehend it. But over time, this God started to produce other deities known as eons. It produced quite a few, and they were basically in pairs, having a male and female counterpart. Now, they all existed within this great spiritual realm. But here's where things got a little messy. One of these eons was referred to as Wisdom or Sophia, and she decided to reproduce without a male counterpart. So she reproduced asexually. And while it worked, her offspring was this deformed, twisted creature known as the demiurge. It was deformed, twisted, and evil, right? So what did the other eons do? They cast it out. It's put in isolation away from the spiritual realm. In its isolation, it decided to create its own realm, right? So it decided to create its own eons and later our reality. But it convinced its creations that it was the supreme God. There was nothing beyond him, forcing its creations to worship it. But because it's so imperfect, its creations are imperfect, which is why our world is full of suffering and pain, according to the Gnostics. And according to the Gnostics, the demiurge is the God of the Old Testament. So the goal of the Gnostics, at least those that believed in this creation myth, was to realize the reality of our existence. Of course, Christians didn't really like this whole conspiracy theory about them, so that's why Gnostic texts are so rare. They were burnt, destroyed throughout history.
Did you know that the Gnostics believed that the God of the Christians and Jews is not the real God? Let me explain. Gnosticism is a collection of different beliefs and ideas that came during the early stages of Christianity. According to early Gnostic texts, the God of the Old Testament, i.e. the God of the Christians and Jews, is an evil deity who is also responsible for creating the material world. This God created Adam and Eve and kept them in the Garden of Eden to make sure that Adam and his descendants, i.e. humans, would never ascend to divinity. The Gnostics called the God of the Old Testament the Demiurge. However, they also considered the Demiurge to be different to the God of the New Testament, who was described as benevolent.
Modern Christianity is not faithful to the authentic teachings of Jesus. Gnostics were the original Christians. Maybe you haven't heard of the Gnostics because the Gnostics was considered to be a heretic by the church. Ang mga Gnostics ay pinagpapatay at pinagsusunog noong unang panahon because they were speaking of a different truth than the Roman Catholics. Ang mga Gnostics kasi, they believe that God is within them and you don't need priests so that you can connect to the divine because God is within you, and when you access God within you and when you live according to the teachings of the Christ, which is the image and likeness of the living God, we will also transform to become the Christ. Gnosticism speaks of the Christhood of everyone, the priesthood of everyone. It was the original teachings of our Lord and Master Jesus. Let me start from Valentinus. Valentinus was supposed to be elected as the Bishop of Rome or the Pope during the 2nd century. However, he was considered to be a heretic because he was teaching Gnosticism. He was teaching these things that I'm saying to you right now. And what's fascinating is that the early church even believed in reincarnation. It was not Valentinus himself, but Origen, the 1st century church father, actually believed in reincarnation. He called it apokatastasis, or the restoration of all souls to its original form. And according to Origen, because we were all created by God, we will all go back to God through a process of transmigration, and we call that in Buddhism reincarnation. Now, sino ba ito si Valentinus? Valentinus was actually trained by Theodus, and Theodus was actually an inner disciple of the Apostle Paul. Now, let's go to Apostle Paul. Si Apostle Paul, he was a Jew, and he was converted into one of the followers of Jesus Christ, and then he carried the Jewish teachings of Jesus to the Gentiles. Now, kasi hindi makarelate yung mga Gentiles, Paul actually tried to tone down his explanation about the mysticism of Jesus. So, may dalawang uri ng disciple si Paul. He has an outer disciple and he also has inner disciples. The outer disciples, he was teaching the things that evolve today as modern and mainstream Christianity. However, his inner disciples were the ones being taught by the mystical truths that was taught to him by the original apostles of our Lord and Master Jesus. And this is Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism believes that the Bible is a book that is not meant to be understood literally, but rather it's meant to be understood figuratively. So the Bible contains spiritual truths, but not historical facts. So if we just know how to read the Bible, we will get nuggets of wisdom from it. Now, bakit may mystical teaching si Jesus? Going back to Jesus in Galilee, Jesus was actually a Kabbalist. What is a Kabbalist? Kabbalah is the ancient form of Jewish mysticism. And in Kabbalah, there are concepts like reincarnation, and in Jewish it's called Gilgulum. They teach that the soul evolves through countless lifetimes in order for it to attain perfection and be reunited with the source or God. And once you get perfected, you will become the Christ. Now Jesus, on his time, he became the Christ. He became the perfected form of human being, the perfect Adam, the Bar Inash, or the Son of Man. And because of that, he is now teaching the world on how to evolve, on how to become the perfect man, or the perfect Adam. If we try to look at the story of Jesus, it was said that Jesus daw was born of a virgin birth. Actually, hindi virgin si Mama Mary. It was a mistranslation. Hindi virgin birth, but it was young lady. The original Hebrew word was young lady, but it was transformed into a virgin because they were some like synonymous. Now, Jesus became the Christ when he started his training with John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist was actually the tzaddik, or the master of Jesus Christ. He was trained by John the Baptist. At makikita natin yan when Jesus was baptized by John in the river of Jordan. That was actually his initiation so that Jesus will be one of the members of his spiritual circle. Now Jesus meditated for 40 days and 40 nights, and he was tempted by the devil, and then after he defeated the devil, he started getting his own disciples. And if we try to look at the story of Jesus Christ, it is very similar to the story of Prince Siddhartha Gautama in India 500 years before the birth of Jesus. Now, what can we say about this parallels of the story? It simply means that Jesus was a mystic, and that what happened to Jesus can also happen to us. And what Jesus was teaching is actually to reconnect to the divine or to the God within us, so that we will transform according to the image and likeness of this God within us.